Good day, everybody. This is John Morrow, professional speaker, distinguished Toastmaster, author of the book I Never Noticed, My Journey Through Alzheimer's with Mom, and of course the keynote speaker of the same subject. There are a lot of other areas that I talk about, but Alzheimer's, understanding Alzheimer's and understanding the needs of the victims and caregivers is my principal focus. Today I begin with an introduction to a series of videos that I am very, very passionate about. We often talk about understanding the disease and understanding the victim, but what a lot of you don't know is that these victims of Alzheimer's are not just victims of a disease, but can in many cases become the victim of evil, predatory-minded people who want to take advantage of the elderly, the ill, and those that are grieving and lonely, perhaps widowed. It's true. The circumstances that resulted in my sister and I seeing Mother's Alzheimer's at work and beginning the journey of fighting that disease started with something that totally had nothing to do with Alzheimer's, but rather had everything to do with Mother being alone and a widow. In 2010, my father died unexpectedly. It was a shock to all of us, but it was particularly a shock to Mother because Mother had just recently retired at the age of 77, and now she was spending time with Dad, and they were having some quality time together. But Dad had a surgery, and unfortunately his heart couldn't take it, and he died of cardiac arrest. What we did not see at that time was that Mother began a downhill progression emotionally. Later we would understand that it was part of the Alzheimer's doing its evil work in her mind. But in doing it, one of the things that happens with you in Alzheimer's in the early going is you begin to lose memory of the things that you do, and you also begin to have trouble making good judgments. And so in March of 2011, when we received that fateful phone call from the bank about a check that Mother had written to a party that made absolutely no sense and for a reason that was totally ridiculous, we knew that there was something terribly wrong. My dad had done a good job of leaving Mother well-financed and vested, including the home being paid for and no credit card debt, and savings that could make her comfortable in her home for a number of years. Mother was giving money away to predators that first contacted her by mail with bogus offers of winning sweepstakes and receiving cash awards and cars and gifts, and all she had to do was fill out the forms, provide the necessary information. You know the information was going to include her Social Security number, her telephone, her address, and any other factual data that could be accessed by the computer. And she would send this information in, and usually there was a fee that she had to pay, and it was a simple fee, started at $5. Then later, as she advanced up in the sweepstakes process, they wanted $20, then $50, then $100. And then it became crazy, because now that they had her telephone number, they started calling her. And they started telling her, you've won this, but you need to send this in, you need to send this in. And what led to the phone call was that my mother was contacted one day by one of these predators, and the predator said to her, congratulations, you have won $1 million, and we are going to want to deliver that check to you in person at your home on the following date, but we need you to pay the taxes on that winnings before we can deliver you your check. And she said, how much are the taxes? They said, $20,000. My mother had a few $100,000 in savings. It was nothing for her to go and write that check, and she did. Further, she put that check into the mail to an address that was in New York City at a post office box. And then she dropped it into the mail, and she thought about it for a day, thinking about the money that she was going to get and how it would help her and help her family and give her more to leave to her children. Her motives were good, but her judgment was bad, and she did not realize, and anybody with common sense would know this, but remember, we're dealing with Alzheimer's patients. You don't send your taxes in before you receive your proceeds. You receive your proceeds, and then you claim them on your IRS form, and you file the taxes applicable for that proceed. But Mother was living by herself. They knew she was by herself. You see, the first trick of these individuals is that they have computers. They work in what's called a boiler room. Imagine, if you would, a room staffed by 25, 50, maybe even 100 people working for a syndicate. The syndicate is not in the United States, but in fact it's offshore. It's composed of individuals that speak numerous languages, because you see, these individuals don't just contact citizens in the U.S. that are retired or living alone or have gone through a situation where they've lost a loved one and they're retired. They also contact individuals in Europe and South America, because this information is available on the World Wide Web. And so they can look up newspapers in major cities. They can find obituaries. And you know something? An obituary will actually give you a lot of good information. If I were looking at an obit, I can tell you these following things. The individual is survived by perhaps children. The children are adults, and usually in the obit it says that the children either live in the town that that person lives in, or they live outside of town. My mother retired, living alone in her house, no relatives in the area. I lived in Florida, my sister lived in Illinois. She was a perfect target. Plus, she was a widow. Had been married to her husband, my father, for almost 61 years. Another piece of information to use against her. Her loneliness. How do you think you would feel if you're lonely and a male voice on the other end of the phone is speaking to you in soothing, kind, warm, almost seemingly loving, seductive fashion, and you are mentally impaired because Alzheimer's is taking away your capacity to make good judgments? It is a recipe and a formula for an individual slowly but surely in a systematic fashion giving away every dollar that they have, expecting to get something in return, only to find that the check is still in the mail. This is what the series is about. I will be talking to you about how you need to begin now for your loved one to prepare a way to protect them from predators. Predators who you probably would wish the worst of. But if the truth be known, there's not a thing you can do about them personally. Not even law enforcement in this country can. If you want to save your loved one who has Alzheimer's or any other form of cognitive problem or suffering from loneliness and by themselves, you need to begin to understand the nature of the beast, and you need to begin to take the actions necessary to protect their financial resources before they are drained dry. Happens every day. I look forward to talking to you next time around on this series. Until then, John Morrow saying thank you and so long.